forecourt, but mostly it's like only greenery area. And this is this interquadra area, which has like no amenities at all. And what you could observe is that people were using more of these areas because they were stuck at home during the COVID time, and they just can get out very easily and find like a safe place to get out of the lockdown, I mean, during lockdown. Another finding that I got is that people avoided to go to public space that were far from home. So from all those 5 precincts that I found, that I chose, the furthest one that is not very close to the residential area was the ones that people avoided going because you need a car or you need to go take a public transportation. So people are avoiding more. So these are the figures that I got that from these 3 furthest public spaces that it has decreased. And the city park, which is a quick, like it's a big equipment from the town, it got a decrease in usage, in frequency, based on frequency. The lake also decreased, and the residential access, the ASHAM. And regarding to the types of activities, the social activities where you're gathering with people more had decreased in all public spaces, but it has a slight increase in the interquadra areas. But that public space, you could see people like doing picnics during pandemic. So all the social activities that you want to do, we want to gather people, you would do on those areas which are they have no amenities, but it has like plenty of space. And when it comes to exercising, people prefer to do those types of activities also in the closest public space, which are the superquadra and interquadra. And I also measured walking the dog because I think walking the dog was like a big activity during the pandemic worldwide. And I measured that also. So walking the dog was an activity that increased significantly during the pandemic in this closest public space. When it comes to modes of transportation, it didn't change much before and after during the COVID. So walking was the preferred mode of transportation when it comes to access the nearest public spaces, and whereas cars is the preferred mode of transportation when you have to go to those further areas. And I could measure a slight increase in usage of the bike in the interquadra areas, and also when it comes to go access the lake. And there was like a big increase on the usage of the lake on both on weekdays and weekends during the pandemic. So it has increased almost 10%. And I could also measure that the night usage of public spaces had a slight increase during the pandemic in these 3 areas: superquadra, interquadras, and ICOMOS. And one of the last part of my survey, I asked about what are the motivations for people to use the public space during the pandemic, and you can see from the graph that most of them chose to use the public space because they get this need for a big space and because it's pleasant. And I also asked what are the reasons for not using the public space, and safety came like a top motivation for not using the public space, but not the safety. When I interviewed, I got the sense that the safety that they're talking about is not the safety of being robbed or anything. It's the safety for a fear of contamination. So people avoid using public space or the fear of getting contaminated by other people. So, and I had like a personal, I was intrigued by people who have a child, because I have a child on my own. And I thought during the pandemic, that was a big challenge to stay at home with a kid inside. So I put that on my survey also to see to measure whether having a kid at home will push you to use more of the public space. And these numbers I got said there was a slight increase of usage in the supercluster areas, which is the closest areas that you have close to your residential area. There was a slight increase of usage because you have a child at home. And yeah, I also got the chance to ask about the perception of public space in Brasilia, because I had the sense that before COVID, people didn't get much attention to the public spaces in Brasilia. And I had the impression that after COVID, they would feel differently about having this amount of green spaces available to you, which is not something that you can see in many cities, in the majority of cities. So the researchers that I saw, that people were saying, oh, after COVID, we need to think our cities better to increase the number, the area of public spaces, because we need it. And in Brasilia, it's the opposite. We have a lot of green areas. So what is the difference between living in a city who has an abundance of public spaces and during a pandemic and in any other town that would not have that? So I got the perception from my interviewees that they were very satisfied and happy to live in Brasilia, because Brasilia has this abundance of public space. So that was a little bit of my research. Of course, there is like lots of more findings that I got, but I think time-wise, that's what I can show you about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla, for your interesting presentation on your PhD. Well, with the last sentence, you already gave the answer to the question I wanted to ask you. Like, is the large-scale city plan of Brasilia, which is something from the other century, is it suitable, or did it show to be suitable during the COVID-19 pandemic? But I think your answer is yes to that. Yeah. And yeah, interesting to see and to learn from that experience, which is quite a unique experience, of course, in accordance to our environments. I don't know if there are questions from the participants as well. I see a hand. Nicholas, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Meurs. Carla, are you back in Brasilia at the moment?
No, I'm Rotterdam.
Oh, you're in Rotterdam. Okay, so maybe you don't know the answer to this question. My question is, I, for one, thought that, you know, the COVID pandemic would be an opportunity maybe to recalibrate, to re-steer, and to rethink society. But my experience is that we're living in a kind of a post-COVID bubble at the moment, and we're all going back to the way it was. And my question to you is, do you know whether in Brasilia any of the lessons of the pandemic have stuck, or have people just fallen back into old habits?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I didn't put it in my presentation, but from my interviewees, and I think on my survey, my last question was, what is the likelihood for you to continue using the public space in a post-COVID scenario? And back then, that was unimaginable. We're still starting the vaccination by the time I did the survey. But most of them, they said, yes, I'm going to continue. And I can see from my friends, they are still using the public spaces for like birthday parties and barbecuing, picnicking. So I can see that people are gathering more, and they could see like the advantage of having like so close to your house, like a really big space. So why would you have like a birthday, a kid's birthday inside your house when you have like this amount of space that you just run around? So I can see most of my friends are doing that still after COVID. I think the challenge is, since now that it's kind of proven that the COVID has increased the frequency in usage of public space, how the municipality are going to address, like in getting those public spaces more attractive or more cleaner, or some other activities to get this usage going on.
Okay, thank you. Jean-Paul?
Yes, Carla. So then, being an urbanist and an architect, and even by now a qualified urban developer, how then, which lessons would you take from this in case you were ordered to create a new capital city for a new country? What lessons does this give to you? How would your new capital city look like?
I mean, using Brasilia as a background, I think the pandemic had showed us that we could achieve a lot more, like in your own neighborhood, in your own surroundings. So the decrease in usage of cars, of taking your car to go somewhere, or the choices that you can make and live a good life, it can be like in your surroundings. And I think that the debate of the 15-minute city, it can apply to Brasilia if you think about it. It has all the elements to transform Brasilia in a 15-minute city, because that was the origin of the superquadra way of living, is that you live, you work, and you study, and you get your shopping done, like in this 2-kilometer radius. That was the original idea. And I think that can happen. And of course, with the remote working, it helps. So I think it's hard to think of Brasilia because it's so car-centric. Everything is think about the car. But I think it's possible to live in a city that is self-sufficient in your own, I cannot say neighborhood, because Brasilia doesn't have neighborhoods, but in your own surroundings.
So is Almere, is that then your new city?
Well, from what I saw in Almere, I think Almere it's pretty much zoned. What I understood it as, you have the residential area, you have the center, and I didn't get too much time to go around, but I think the residential area is too separate from commercial, from the center. So I could see Brasilia feelings there. So that you need the car, you need to commute a lot to do your things, but that was my impression, not studying too much of Almere.
Okay, thanks.
Interesting comparison to this scale as well. I was wondering as well, Jean-Paul already mentioned that urban planning is about governance, according to the presentation of Paul, but I think urban planning is also about behavior of the people who use it, and they determine in the end the values of it, and if it's functioning or not. And I'm curious about the role of the governance or the local municipality in Brasilia during the COVID-19 pandemic. Was there any way of influencing people's behavior of using the city, or were it the people, the residents, who decided how to use public space, and was that a way of new kind of freedom that people started to discover? I was wondering about it.
I think the municipality in Brasilia did very little during the pandemic. I think what I heard about is that they only closed some roads for cars to transform not only Eixão, the area that I studied, another roads they closed like Sundays and Saturdays for people to exercise. But other than that, I don't think there was too much thing going on. I think what happened is more like the people, and since Brasilia was a bit, Brazil itself was a country that the rules from the government regarding the COVID was a bit odd. Some of them like have like lockdown in one place and in another city not. Sometimes you have to wear face masks in a public space, sometimes you're not. So people got a little bit confused, so they created their own rules. So even the people that I interviewed, they were making a lockdown themselves because they were afraid to get out, because it was not compulsory lockdown at some point, and some points are. So it was super confusing. So I think people adapted in their own way of living. But when it comes to governance in Brasilia, it's interesting because since it's a heritage listed city and it's the whole city, the heart of the city is all listed, there is very little room for change in Brasilia. And so I think people over the years, they try to adapt to this rigid thing of expanding or how to get more density in the city that is very, there is very rigid rules. So I could sense, I couldn't measure, I'm talking just by my sensation that people started changing their way of living. So there was more like co-living things. So people start living in commercial areas, which is not allowed, but they're living in commercial areas. So there was a lot of adaptation that people did themselves without the governance, regardless of the governance. We try to adapt the living and we adapt to the conditions in this framework that is so rigid because of the heritage listing condition. So I think people in the end, they will do whatever it takes to adapt their lives to the fabric that the city offers.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've seen in Europe and here in the Netherlands, especially during the pandemic, government was closing public parks because of overcrowding. The places, and especially in dense cities like Amsterdam, the spare space that was available was closed by the government, so there was less room for people to move around, and well, at the same time there was a need of distance in between each other. So it was an interesting development we've seen here as well, but it must be totally different there, of course, in Brazil, with the scale of
in Brasilia, yeah, the scale in Brasilia is so big that they will need a lot of people to reinforce that. But I've heard that in Rio de Janeiro, they were, and other beach cities, they are closing the beach for people. And yeah, some people got like fines for it, but I think the scale is so big that it's really hard to enforce that. And like in Brasilia, the public space are so huge that it will be mostly impossible to enforce that.
Yeah. Are any other questions maybe, or experiences after these 2 years we've had?
Maybe a question for Carla. Maybe, I don't know if it's too big or not, but you mentioned a few times that the heritage status is quite rigid. So is the status, is it serving the people? Is it serving the needs of its inhabitants? Or should it be more open to adaptation?
That's a $1 million question, because we've been trying to come up with what is important to preserve in Brasilia for more than 20 years, and we didn't reach a conclusion yet, because the city is so big and there's so many elements that I worked like for a year in a technical group with university, people from resident community and academia, and we were trying to come up, okay, we need some rules to get some room from expansion for density, but what is important in Brasilia to preserve that can accommodate these expansions, because we have plenty of area. There's like immense amount of area. So that's the biggest challenge. So people, when they get to visit Brasilia, they say, wow, there's so much green space that you can increase density like crazy here. You can solve a lot of problems here. But at the same time, we need governance. We need like someone to say, no, this is an important and historical site that needs to be preserved. But what exactly needs to be preserved? Because it's a concept of living. It's an urban design. It's a draft. So how can you preserve that area and leave room for expansion, for changes? And there's a lot of discussions in how to increase residential areas in the center, because we have, Brasilia is very, if you're not familiar with Brasilia, there's like zoning, there's zoning for hotels, there's zoning for commercial, there's zoning for, everything is zoned. And we're thinking that if the zoning itself is an attribute that has to be preserved, or is the materialize of the buildings that is preserved. So the difficulty is that how can you preserve a function, a zone, and not the building itself. So the building is not, I'm not talking about Oscar Niemeyer, the other buildings. The materialize of the building is not important. So it's the idea behind it. How can you preserve an idea? So that is the biggest challenge in coming up with the policy to preserve Brasilia. But we are getting there. There's a lot of discussions. There's people who are getting social housing, commercial area, like mixed use. So we are discussing, and the Heritage Agency plays a really big part of it. And but there's like pressure from real estate people. There's pressure from construction business. There's pressure from everywhere. And we have to together come up with an idea and how to preserve and get like a better city for everybody. But that's yet to be seen.
Thank you.
May I add to that, Meurs?
Yeah, sure, Paul, go ahead.
I've been many times to Brasilia, in particular, when I was doing my PhD, I was organizing trips for Dutch architects to Brazil. That paid my PhD research. I've been there many times, and I'm trying to follow the debate. It's interesting that this idea of you do not preserve the buildings themselves, but the zoning and the functions. But in the city of transformation, our policy normally is not to control the functions, but to mix them as good as you can, especially in heritage sites, because it's very complicated. So whatever use comes in is very welcome. But we try to keep the atmosphere, the character. So if you have a city built up of different atmospheres, and if the city changes, you can try to find a new arrangement of use. And in Brasilia, it's not only about densification, but it's also that certain areas, for instance, with the neighborhood commerce, the one you know very well, the W3, it's a kind of an avenue for the shops which are not the local grocery stores, scale bigger. And they have been for a long time a bit problematic. It would be very interesting to see this as a big quality for the city and try to find out what use can make it stronger. Or the center with all the segregation of functions, it's the most boring center you can have. All the hotels are in one area and all the shops are in another area and shops for all the products are in another area. So the idea of centrality would be to find a mixture without throwing away these different atmospheres you have in the center. So for me, it's very funny to follow the discussion in Brasilia because our approach to this problem, even in modern heritage areas, would be very different. And we try to accommodate a current life on the stage of the past. And you should try to stick very much to the zoning.
And maybe, Paul, maybe the conclusion, one of the conclusions could be that we lost belief in what we say in Dutch maakbaarheid, or how and to what extent you can design and actually control things in life as a designer. And if I hear the answer from Carla, it sounds like you're more sticking to the original idea and the original concept, preserving it even in a functional level, which I think for the good or the better, I don't know, but we lost track on that sense of the belief in designability. So it's very interesting to hear that and to compare that. No.
Well, Dan, I would almost thank you for this nice conclusion you gave us after this evening, and I think it's also time to go to an ending tonight. Yeah, there have been said a lot of interesting things about governance, about behavior, about scale, about preservation and heritage values, and that all together. And then we have the factor of time and COVID. So I think it's what we. It's a question about the way cities and people as well can adapt on time and situations, and I think that it requires a form of flexibility both in urban planning and in the way of living, and the city has to facilitate that, I think. And well, it's an interesting story which will continue seeing the developments over the world, with new cities being planned and spread out. So we can talk about it longer, but we should not do it because it's already late. Is there anyone who still has this feeling to add something or to say something? This is the last chance to do so. Otherwise, I will end this lecture night, and I would really like to thank Paul and Carla, our lecturers for tonight, for their interesting presentations, and of course Jean-Paul as well for moderating as well. And of course, I would like to thank you for being here tonight and staying with us the whole evening. I think we have not seen that many people tonight, but I think we had a good concentration on the presentations tonight. So I'd like to thank everybody. I hope you all found it an interesting topic that we spoke about, and we hope to see you on the next ICOMOS lecture. That will be the 11th of May, so please block your agenda, Wednesday night, 11th of May. And let me see the topic, which is already known. No, I kind of lost it. No, the topic will be the illicit trade of cultural heritage. So we skip to another topic, of course, which will be the illicit trade of cultural heritage. So please be there with us again, and we hope to see you then on the 11th of May. It's good to say we are thinking about, as Jean-Paul already mentioned, hosting on site, but we will do it online for sure as well the next time, so you can be there. Okay, I think we can leave it for this. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Carla, thank you again.
Thank you.
See you the next time. Bye bye.
Bye.